So there has never been in my life a college basketball or college football program that was this good that got discussed so infrequently. In fact, UConn's women's program, excellent, gets much more national discussion, prestige, considered iconic. And if you look at the great men's college basketball programs of all time, we can put them up for you. I don't think people understand how great UConn is. I was in that state for 10 years. UCLA's got the most titles, the John Wooden era, 11. Kentucky, 8. Carolina, 6. UConn will be tied with the Tar Heels, above Duke, vaunted Indiana, above Kansas if they win. But we don't talk about UConn like Duke or Carolina or Kansas. Maybe it's because they're not flashy. They've had a few down years. They've had different coaches win them. Calhoun, Dan Hurley, Kevin Ali. They've had very few historic Christian Leitners, maybe, or Luau Cinders. Maybe that's it. Didn't have a coach like Bobby Knight that got talked about, or Coach K. But I covered Jerry Tarkanian for years. And the one thing that always stood out with Tark's teams, they weren't always the most talented. They'd have NBA guys on the roster. Nobody played harder than UNLV. Years ago in Denver, I was covering a final between UNLV and Duke, and Krzyzewski said, I've never seen a team play like Tark's teams. He goes, we play hard. I can't get my guys to play that hard both ends every second of every game. That is UConn. That is UConn. Nobody plays this hard. Calhoun, Hurley, it doesn't matter who the coach is. It's just built in. It's in the water in Storrs, Connecticut. I watched them last night. The only people that can beat UConn in this tournament are the referees. If you call a tight game, because they're hyper-aggressive, hyper-intense, and you have a tight whistle, they get into foul trouble, maybe you get them off your game, there's nothing like them in the tournament. Every possession, both ends, absolute intensity, crash the glass. Last night they had almost 40 points in the paint. And again, if the refs let them play, and that's what happens in the NBA finals and the NBA playoffs. The further they go, refs get out of the way. It happens in the conference championships and the Super Bowl. Few flags in the Super Bowl. Refs don't want to be the story. They get out of the way. In March Madness, generally speaking, the further you go, the more the refs get out of the way and let the best teams decide it. That's why physicality in the NFL, NBA, and college basketball, just play hard, force the referees to decide it because they don't want to as the tournament goes on. In the last 2 years, it's hard to be back-to-back champs. UConn has beaten team the last 2 years in the tournament. These are the best teams by 23 points a game. 9 straight games of beating teams by at least 13, and in that time, double-digit advantages on the glass. So there's nobody beating this team. And again, I follow this sport casually from above. There's 360 teams. I can't memorize starting lineups. I watch UConn, Kansas, Duke, Carolina, handful. Last couple of years, they're different than everybody. And last night, the refs let them play. And when you let a team this aggressive with this kind of NBA length, it's very UNLV. They would have your occasional Larry Johnson or Stacey Augmon, but mostly it was effort with guys that would go play overseas, guys that wouldn't star in the NBA. So I'm sitting there listening to the Dodgers yesterday. And it may have been a replay. I don't know if it was live or replay. It's baseball in the summer. I listened to it. And I was thinking as Ohtani was having a very good game. He had a single, a double. He had a walk. He's played very well this year. And I was thinking to myself, I know guys are pretty good at compartmentalizing things. But if you had... if you're lying to everybody and potentially bet on baseball, it would ruin your career. A career corrosive move. You bet on the sport. And you're just fooling all of us. Wouldn't it be eating him up? Living a lie is stressful. But wouldn't you see at the plate, during discussions with the media, on his face and his performance? I mean, he's the Dodgers' DH. So he sits for 45 minutes between at bats. He's not out there in the field. It's different in hockey. It's too fast. Basketball. You don't see prolonged slumps in basketball. A guy may have a bad 2-game stretch, but you shoot 20 times a game. Kobe didn't have a lot of prolonged slumps. Hockey guys don't have a lot of prolonged slumps. Same in the NFL. You can have a bad half. It's mostly due to the defense and the pressure and a bad O-line. But baseball and sometimes golf can be different. long stretches in baseball of inactivity. We've seen great players, your A-Rods, your Barry Bonds, get into their head and have horrible slumps. Derek Jeter didn't have a lot of them, but he had a few of them, and he once talked about it. Derek Jeter said, I want to be around positive, optimistic people. I don't want the sport in my head. If Ohtani was out there knowing that he did something to end his career, don't you think he'd be stressed a little? But if he was lied to, stolen from, duped, which happens to all celebrities at some point, big level, small, then he could just be like, hey, I'm a victim. It happens. I got to move on. I'd be a rich victim, but a victim nonetheless. It'd be like getting rear-ended, pulling into the ballpark. Well, it's not my fault. Insurance will take care of it. I'm going to go take some swings. But as I watch Ohtani, I don't see an evil, deceitful kid. I see a quiet kid who got married in the offseason. Teammates didn't know. Nobody knew. He's kind of quiet for a superstar, very warm, very liked. They say in the Dodger clubhouse, it's brought everybody a little bit closer. I don't know. I know guys are supposed to be great at compartmentalizing stuff. I'm not particularly great at it. If I was living some deceitful life, I think it would eat me up and stress me out, and you'd see it in my performance and my sleep and my body. You'd see it everywhere. But if this is like as bad as some are suggesting, these Vegas guys are betting on baseball for your millions of dollars, I don't know. I don't know how you compartmentalize that. Well, what about Pete Rose? Pete Rose is a different cat, was more comfortable with it, and it was a different time. He didn't have Twitter and YouTube and blogs and pods talking about him every day. You had newspapers. You barely had sports talk radio for most of his career. It's a different ball game now. Controversy is an avalanche that you can't avoid. Back then, as a few letters to the editor, maybe an angst-ridden columnist. You just didn't read the paper. For most of Pete Rose's career, it wasn't even sports talk radio, except maybe in New York or Philadelphia. So I don't know. I go back to this thing. Baseball has a lot of inactivity. In very few I don't see Mahomes going on a bad 6-week stretch. I don't remember Michael Jordan having like 9 games he couldn't hit the mid-range jumper. I've seen baseball players get into their head and go into the tank, and I'm talking all-time guys. Wouldn't this affect Ohtani more? His exit velocity on a couple of his hits yesterday were harder than any Dodger hit last year, or second hardest. That's my take. Dodgers are good. Ohtani's amazing. This would be eating people up if he was living a gigantic lie. I'm going to be proven wrong potentially on all of this, but it just feels like the kid, foreign land, got duped. That's what it feels like. I'm not protecting anybody. I'm not a guy that lives and breathes with baseball. That's what it feels like to me. Hi, everybody. It's me, Uncle Colin. Subscribe here to get the latest from the herd, including exclusive behind-the-scenes videos and more, wherever you may be, however you may be watching. Thanks again for making us part of your day.